Greetings everybody, Amar here. In this video, I'm looking at the 10 game group chart as a way to help filter my number selections. Now this is E3 number group tracker of the 10 game group chart, and it tells you how many numbers are in each decade. By default, it's set up by decades. You can change the group size, but if you look at the numbers that come out per decade, generally it's only going to be one number. Here you had one number in the second decade, which is the teens, and then you had one number in the 20s, one number is in the 30s. So it's generally going to be one or two numbers, okay, where some decades don't have any numbers represented by these black boxes, or rather highlighted by these black boxes. You didn't have three numbers in a decade until over here, where you had three numbers in the 40s decade with 41, 42, 46. So knowing that you're only going to have one number correct, you're hoping, or I'm hoping, to guess one number correct by placing it, only selecting four numbers per group. Okay, so if you have four numbers per group and you have six groups here, or six decades, then you're only using 24 numbers, okay, which is less than the 53, of course, or 54 total. But some decades, I'm going to venture to say that you have to guess correctly with only one or two numbers, okay. Now certainly that's difficult, but if you look at the drawing since hit chart here, I highlighted certain decades that only had one number in it. Now in this particular decade here, the teens, the 10 hit, but it was an adjacent to the 11. So you can reduce your selections just by adjacents in, let's say, one particular decade. Over here also, in the 30s decades, you had the number 31 that hit as a long shot and as an adjacent. Now 12 is a varying long, it's not really a long shot, it's only 12 games. But here in this particular drawing, you had one number that came out in the decade, the number 21 at 15 games. And then on the next drawing, again, only one number, and it was an adjacent, right? Here you had a 2-day skip. Over here you had an adjacent. Here was a long skip of 23 games. Here is an intermediate upstroke of 9 games. Here is a long skip of 14 games. Over here you have an adjacent. So you can do some reduction by using, let's say, long shots or adjacents. Adjacents being one of my favorites because it's, it can only be +1 or -1. In this particular one, where there was only one number in the decade, it was a repeat. Of course, it would have been hard to guess which of these four numbers would repeat, but it was only one number. All right. So I'm trying to extrapolate this idea where you only have one or two numbers in any particular decade to the 4B. Okay. Now the hardest part is that you have to guess the right starting point. Now when I actually started with the 4B, it was after this 8 had hit here after 34 games. So I used this 8 as my starting point. So I'm going to look at the 4B now. And you can see here, this is where the 0 skip hit is. I highlighted it in black now, or covered it in black, because we've gone from a previous skip of 14 games, let's say for the number 1, and here it's 15, here it's 16, and current skip is 7. So this technically is like the 0 skip, like that you would find in 4B. Okay. well, sorry, that's a merged cell, so I can't put a 0 in there. But anyway, so it's no longer 14. But when I made these selections here, this was the current skip. Okay, so I actually started with the number 8. Okay, because it was a 34-0 skip. I put a little happy face there because I got that one correct. And the other number that I was using as my starting point was the 4 because it had a long flag. Now, the flag is a streak, so these everywhere where you see these pink highlights here represents a long streak. Okay, now a flag generally is 1-5, and you did have a 1-5 pattern here. So this is classic flag, right? But the rest of the streak was like 3-6, 3-6, and here you had an upstroke from a 4 to an 8, where the 8 is the symmetry of this 10. Now I suppose the reason why it stayed within the streak is because the 8 is symmetrical to the 10 on the downside, but that was where one of my starting point was. It was the 4 and the 8. So you have a whole bunch of 6s in here. You had an 8-6, 3-6, and you have 3-6-6, and then the pattern now is 1-5, and now it's at 6 again. All right. So this is the selection for today, which is the Wednesday. This is the Wednesday here, right? And I don't have the date here, but I did put the date down here at the bottom. Okay, so this is Wednesday, which is today, which is November, not today, which is tomorrow, November 14. So this particular drawing where I made the selections was on November 3rd, and that's when I had exported the 4B and marked the streaks. So this 4 is a streak, all right? So in this particular drawing, these red boxes represents the selections, my guesses. So I guessed the 4, and then I guessed the 8, and then off of the 8, right? So I was guessing these as my decade with 2 numbers, which means is that all the other decades would have had, let's say, only 1 number. So I used a gap of 10 because if you're gonna have only 1 number per decade, that a gap of 10 would prevent you from having 2 numbers in any particular decade most times or many times. So this gap 10 off of this 8 brought me to the 19. So I picked this 19 here, and that was the selection that I made. The pattern was 21-04, so that was the upstroke, okay, approaching the classic flag. And the result came out was 1820. So I picked a 19 and it came out 1820. So I was really close just using that simple gap 10 off of the 8, which is the repeat. So you have to guess the starting point correct. The 4 has not come out, but the 8 came out. And then, so I continued from this 19. Now, going down to the 19, I picked, this is a gap 6, and I picked the 26. And I believe because it was a triple bottom, right? You had the skip pattern of 10, 11, 9. Okay, so at this point it was 10, 11, 9. This point is 10, 11, 10. This is 10, 11, 11. And then now it's 10, 11, 12, which is the current skip here. So it is still a bottom because the 12 is still symmetrical to the 10. And so that's why I had picked it. And of course I was wrong, didn't come out. And then I guess I used the small gap here because off of this decade. So no gap 10, but again I'm still was trying to keep only 1 number per decade in the selections. So I went to the 30 here, and the reasoning behind the guess was it was a 12-4-5. Okay, so 5 symmetry to the 4. It didn't hit. Now it's at a skip of 8. All right. I didn't mark any red boxes in this particular Saturday because I fell behind and I didn't actually make any guesses. But if you counted the red square selections from the previous drawing, you know, I believe it was only, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Almost, there's only 14 numbers, okay? But I don't think I got any of those right anyway. No, I did actually. I did here, right? Okay, well let me just continue with this from the 19. So 19, I came over to this triple bottom, guessed one correct here, and so I said I got to go to the next decade if I'm correct. Now, if I had actually gone gap 10 from this 30, that would have put me right where the numbers had come out. Okay, it was a 5, 7, right? But I didn't pick anything here, right? But just the gap 10 off of an incorrect guess would have brought me to the correct, some other correct numbers. And then my final selection was this 46. The 46 was it's in a streak, right? You can see you had the 7, 7 symmetry. Then here's your hot skip of 2, and then it had an 8 bottom, and then it was a 4. So I said this streak is going to continue, and I believe also because it had had a long streak here, where you can see you had an 8-4 skip over here. So this was a pretty long streak. I didn't highlight it pink, but that is a streak that can be highlighted. And so what I would do is I would just highlight this here, right, and then drag it down so I have an idea of a streak that occurred with the number 46, so I can anticipate how long the streak might be, right? You can see it was a pretty long streak. Here you had a very small streak, but it's very important to know the possible maximum hits that a particular number could have in a streak when you put a wager on it. Because if the trend is it only has 3 hits in a streak for like 2 years, then you wouldn't want to expect it to have a 4th hit or a 5th hit. Okay, well, 4th hit. But if you have a number with a long streak, then the possibility of having another long streak again is actually pretty good. And like I said, with the number 4 up at the top, you can see that it's a very long streak. This streak occurred after this skip of 10. I don't know the date when this 10 occurred, but it had to be a long time. And you know, it's probably somewhere January, February of the year. So it's been a streak for a long time. Now on the next drawing, I put this 8 to repeat again, and I kept the 4, and then I added this 1 and this 2 because of the bottoms, right? It was a 16-15, right? 16-15 symmetry, and you had a 15 here, all right? And so I had guessed that, and I was wrong, okay? However, the number 2 is now 16-16. So I was hoping that it would be here 16-14. This is 16-15, and now 16-16 symmetry. So now I'm keeping the 2 and the 4 now. So now if I'm correct with these two numbers, okay, in the in this decade, then you're only going to have one number probably in this decade. So I used the gap 10 off of the 4, and that brought me to the 15. Now I wasn't crazy about the 15 because it's a reverse flag position, and that's a 23-5 here, reverse. And if you go back and look at the rest of the 15 pattern, it came, well, it did come in reverse here at 13-6. So there is a small, well, I can't call it a trend because it only happened once, but it is certainly similar to this. But I've historically had bad luck, okay, with the reverse flag, so I didn't go with the 15, and I went with the 16 here to repeat after this 26. Now, if you look back, going with the number 16 here, it doesn't have a lot of repeats either. So it's not really that hot as far as the trend is concerned. So then I went in with the 17. I marked the 17 also because I wasn't crazy with the 16, and the number 17 is at skip 35. I don't know how it looks on the skip chart, but I do like the 35 skip 35 because it's approaching a multiple of 12. And if you look at the drawing since hit chart, you had a lot of numbers hitting in this 34, 36 area. You had 34 over here games, and then you had over here 37 games. Okay, so I threw that in there for the long shot. And then I went with another gap 10, right? So a gap 10 from the 16 brings us back here to the 27, which is a pattern here. It's in a streak, 5, 4, 2, and now it's 6. So I did keep that in. And the 26 I kept also, though that's not a gap 10, but it's a little less. Because now the symmetry on the 26 is 10, 11, now it's 12. So it's still at that good chart point. All right. Let me see, what else did I do here? 31. I kept it 31 because it's hot and hitting. It's at 0, 1. Excuse me. 0, 1. And you have to read it now. The 4B becomes a little bit of a mental exercise to read the 4B correctly now. It's read 3, 0, 1, and then you had a 2, and now it's at skip 1. So I put that here as a hot and hitting. Now, these numbers came out the previous Saturday, 37, 38, and 40. And I had actually picked all 3 of these numbers, so that was kind of interesting. And so I was trying to look back and see why was I picking them, because I kind of didn't really remember too well. So if you look at the number 37 here, okay, I have it marked here. This is the third call period, all right. But this is a correction because it's only one hit, and this was a reverse correction. And this is the fourth call period. This would be fifth call period. This is called sixth call period, and this is the seventh call period. So I figured it's going to have a little bit of a streak, hopefully. So the previous skip pattern was 792, right? This here would have been 792. Here would have been 793. So I was playing it as a hot skip off of the 9, and it wound up coming out 794, right? This 38 I had played because it was, at this point, it was 10-9, and here it was 10-10 exact. It actually came out 10-11, so that was a bottom. And then the number 40 here was at skip. I picked it at skip 36 because here would have been skip 35, here is skip 36, and here is skip 37. So I'd actually gotten, I think I had picked 4 out of these red box selections from this Saturday and from this Wednesday. I had 4 numbers correct out of either 12 or 14 numbers. Whether or not they would have lined up for a 4-number win with the Gail Howard wheel, you know, is anybody's guess, but that's not too bad. So I kept this 37 number here on the previous Wednesday, and this red box shouldn't be here because that's next Saturday. It's this Saturday. But so I'm keeping this 37, all right? Because oh, and yeah, I will play it probably for Saturday also, even if it does come out, to look and see if it has a repeat, or if it doesn't hit, to keep it because of this 7 cold periods. And that's why it's good to know how many numbers you could have in a streak because you can see the previous streak here was only 4 hits, including the long shot, and here it was 5 hits, um, including the long shot. However, it did have a pretty long streak going back even further. Okay, and you can see here. So it has the capacity for a very long streak. So that's why the 37 was on my radar back a couple of drawings ago. So let's see, continuing down from the 37, I came to the 42, and the 42 I picked because it's a reverse flag position, right? So it came in 25. No, where am I here? 42. Okay. It was 12:20, so that's 2 cold periods, and then you had the reverse flag position here, right? Now, the number came in before as a reverse flag in a 10-6 position, so I was hoping that it would do the same thing. So 10-5-2 will be a reverse classic flag, where this is skip 2, so that's why I picked this 42. And then I went with another gap of 10. And the gap of 10 brought me to the number 53. And the 53 current streak pattern is, you can see, 19-8-7-6. Okay, and it's adjacent to the 54 that came out. So this is the third cold period for the 53. The 19 is the fourth cold period. And I can highlight and look at the 53 and see that it had a pretty good decent streak before, and I'll highlight it over here. And it actually happens to be a pure flag because it doesn't go above skip 6, right? Those are rare, or I wouldn't say they're rare, but they're hard to isolate. But, well, I guess they are kind of rare because I think only every number possible only has one pure flag minimum a year, right? Or maximum a year. A lot of them have those stupid skip 9s that throw off the whole flag and mess up the whole, make the betting process really difficult to predict. So this 53 had a pretty big streak back here. It was a pure flag. And you can see already this 53 is not a pure flag. It already has a skip of 8, it has a skip of 7, but it could switch into a pure flag, and now it's at skip 6, so that's why I picked the 53. So if you just look at the red boxes based on these gaps and based on trying to put only one number per decade, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So there's only 10 numbers that I've selected. I'm trying not to go overboard by picking, lots of numbers. The most important thing is to have the right starting point. Now you could use your starting point as the 4, but of course you have to be the starting point number has to come out. So if the 4 comes out at the skip 6, you use that as your starting point, and you can start measuring using a gap of 10 to get to the next decade. Generally, I like to use a gap of 10, and then if I don't like the gap 10 number, I just keep on working out. I look at the gap 11, I look at the gap 12, I look at the gap 13, until I find a number that I like. And then once you find a number that you like, you continue again with the gap 10, trying to get to the next decade. Now, if you're here, let's say, if you have the 4 as your starting point, you use the gap 10, all right, and you get these numbers here, and then you could use a smaller gap to look and see how these numbers are, and then use the gap 10 from that particular number. So it's hard to determine when you're going to cluster your numbers and when you're going to keep them spaced out. Now I clustered my numbers here just because you had a whole bunch of good patterns that were there. You had this very cold 37. You had this exact bottom 10-10 of the 38, and then you had the long exhaustion of the 40 at 36. So I chose to cluster here, right? And you could have, let's say, from that cluster, right? If you were looking from the 40, you could say, all right, let me look from here and measure from a gap 10, and you could say, all right, the gap 10 number is now, it's 0. It's at 0.7. I don't like the 0.7. You've passed the classic flag marker of 0.5. You're at 0.7. You're in an upstroke. I don't like it. And you could go to the next one and say, all right, let's see, 52. Okay, you're looking for a hot skip on the 8. Okay, say, yeah, I like that. And then, or you could continue from, so this would be skip gap 11. And then you can say, all right, well, look, how's the gap 12 look? And you say, well, the gap 12 is 875. That's not bad. And say, oh, how's the gap 13 look? And the gap 13 would have been 16403. So you had some symmetry in the 3 and the 4. You had a skip 3 here and a skip 3 here and a skip 3 here. So, it's very hard to guess, of course, but the starting point is the most important thing, I think. If you can guess one number correctly, then you can kind of extrapolate on gaps to where the other numbers should be. So in this particular instance, my starting point was the 4 and the 8, because this 8 was a repeat after this 34, and it had been doing a lot of repeats. It had repeated 600. It had repeated after this cold period of 12. You had a repeat here, 12-0. It repeated after this 11. You had 11-0. So the repeat after the long shot happened to be a trend. So I was using the 4 and the 8. Those were my general starting points. Okay, in this particular drawer, I'm doing the 2 and the 4 is my starting points. 4 being the 6, skip 6. You've had a lot of skip 6 within this intermediate flag. Okay, and then you have this 16-16 pure symmetry or perfect symmetry. And the other starting point to consider is this 37. Right, this 37, because it has 7 cold periods, you could use it, let's say, your starting point, and then you use a gap 10, let's say going this way, that brings you back around to the 26, where you have the 10, 11, 12 symmetry. Or you could look at the gap 10 going the other way and see what you get, In this particular instance, if 37 is your starting point, you could look at a small gap and look at the 40, 41. Okay, within this this group, the 41 would be a pattern of 5-7-2. The 40 is a pattern of 16-7, 37-0. So you could put a small gap there and guess, one or two of these numbers, and then, right, if you guess these two numbers correct, and you know that there's only going to be one number within a decade, you would start measuring gap 10 out from that particular number. And that would bring you back up to around 52, 53, 54. Okay. But if you just want to go straight the gap 10 off the 37, if let's say the 37 is correct and you want to measure the gap 10 going the other way, that brings you to number 48 and 49, which are both skip 13, which means they both actually came in as a neighboring pair a couple drawings ago. So if we look at the drawing since Hitch chart at 48, 49, where is it here? 48. They had come in together, right? And so who knows? Maybe they'll come in together again, right? So you could play those two as a neighboring pair. You could play them both as power numbers. there are different ways that your mind can take you as far as how you want to start guessing. Of course, you can go in a lot of different directions, but a gap 10 off of 37 brings us back to this 46, 47, which have had some hits, and you can see here. Wait a minute, skip 13. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm over here. 48, 49, right? And you can say, all right, well, maybe these won't come in with the gap 10. You can see the symmetry here. Now it's 8, 7 symmetry, right? So maybe you like the 47 and not the 48, 49. But using the 10 game group chart, knowing you're only going to have one or two numbers correct in a group, you got to use that to filter down your number selections. Because if you know you're only going to have one number in each group, and you add another 6 numbers per group, that means you just added 12 losing numbers to your wheel. That's how I see it, logic-wise. And the only way I could actually help reduce is to use the gaps, right? Because the gaps, should come out symmetrical also. So you could say, all right, so for 37, if I use the gap 10, I could say, all right, so, and this is, now I'm predicting two draws ahead, all right, which usually I don't do, and because it's really hard, but with this 4B format, it seems like maybe it'll be easier. I've tried this before for other games, but this is the first time I've, come on, delete, man. I'm trying to delete this gap 10 here. It doesn't want to delete. There it goes. Alright, I want to get one of these red boxes. So if I'm anticipating now 2 drawings ahead, okay, so Wednesday is these red boxes here that I've already selected, right? Now, if you count all of the red boxes for Wednesday, right, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, all the red boxes that I've already previously picked, and add them all together for Wednesday, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. So you have 19 numbers. It's a 19 number wheel, considering you have 54 numbers, so that's less than half. So you're reducing your number pool as opposed to increasing it. I know that Gail Howard says you want to use at least one, half the numbers, 1 or 2 numbers above half. So that would be 22. But she also says you should remove a 10 game group. Now, if you remove a 10 game group, you're turning the number, wait a minute, 44? No, 54. 27, right, I'm sorry. Half of 54 is 27, all right? And she says you can do 1 or 2 numbers above half, right? Which is then 27, 29. So to me, that's too many numbers, because she also says you can remove a 10 game group, right? Which would make the effective game not 54 numbers, but 44 numbers. And half of 44 numbers is 22 numbers. So that should bring you about the 24 numbers if you add 1 or 2 more. But I like to reduce my number because, less numbers means, anyway, whatever. So what is that, 18 or 19 numbers? This, I think it was 19. So 19 numbers total, right? If you add them all. But if you just look at these here, it's only 10, right? But if I use the gap, getting back to the 37 and using the gap 10 going the other way, okay, you had the 48, 49 as a neighboring pair. So you say, okay, that looks kind of decent. And then you have the 47, 8007, right? You had to skip 8 here, skip 7 here. So you could then possibly throw that in also, the 47. So you would go the other way, right? Looking, you have, let's say you get 2 of these correct. So this is one number in this decade, and then one number here you would guess in this decade, and then one number in this decade, and one number in this decade. But I'll leave that for the next workout after we see what happens for Wednesday. I'll fill in the numbers for the skip. I'll add the next um, the next series of skips here, okay? Because what you have over here is basically the 4A, right? It's the drawing sense hit chart read from left to right. But the 4A doesn't put numbers, it puts dashes. Now, I like the numbers better because you can see where the actual skip is, right? So I'll add this new skip line after the drawing for Wednesday, and we'll see how my selections did, are cumulative for the 4 drawings and also just for this one drawing alone. So that's about it. I still have the group Amor Get Howard Lotto on Facebook. I did put 3 quiz questions that a lot of people have not been answering. I guess in their defense, I haven't put the answers anywhere for them to know where they are. They would have to buy the book, and if they didn't want to buy the book, they have to go to the library and read the book to try to find the answers. So I'm going to try to get around to making a couple videos documenting the book and showing you where those answers are, and then that could be a shortcut. But you know, still access to the group. You know, I'll try to start talking to you, see where your level is, and see where your interests are, and see how it goes from there. So I hope this video wasn't too confusing. The next video should be shorter because I'm not going to go into all the explanations on what these patterns and markings and classifications mean. But I will review the drawing results for Wednesday and make predictions for Saturday. This Saturday, which is the 14th, I believe it is. Yes. No. 14th is tomorrow. Saturday is, I don't know, in a few days. So that's about it. Good luck, everybody. Any questions, comments, put them down below. And subscribe. And good luck again. Happy number hunting.